Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. My name is John Carnwath. I am an associate principal here at Wolf Brown, and I've been working on this study, which I'll explain a little bit more about in just a second. But just by way of introduction, I use he, him pronouns. I'm white with brown hair and a beard. I'm in a light gray, almost white room, wearing a shirt with blue and red little pin dots on it, which looks kind of pink on my screen. So before we got started, just want to acknowledge that I'm currently speaking to you from my home in Alameda, California, which is on the lands of the Ohlone peoples, and still home to many Ohlone and other Native Americans who continue to make their home here. While we often work in a virtual space here at Wolf Brown, we like to honor the physical spaces we occupy and acknowledge the importance of these lands and their history. So Alan Brown was planning to join. Oh, I think he just joined in the nick of time. So I think that he wanted to just give a short welcome before we dive into the substance here. Alan?
Thanks, John. Greetings, everyone. Some of you long time no see. I'm Alan Brown, managing principal of Wolf Brown. I make my home now in Detroit. And I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that went into this. Thank my amazing team. All of the work on this organization survey has been done on a volunteer basis on our side, because we thought it was important to include this work in the larger study. So I also just want to acknowledge all of you who took the time to take the survey. It was not short, and contribute information to the study. We'll be going through it today, and I just want to say this is the deadline was last week, and we're looking at the data today. So this has been a whiplash turnaround. We wanted to get it out to you right away, so that you could dig in to the dashboard yourselves if you are so inclined, and so that we could talk about it today. So that's it for me, John. Passing back to you.
Thanks, Alan. Also, just by way of thanks, I want to acknowledge I have several other team members who are making this session work, kind of on screen and behind the scenes. Anik Odom and Aaron Gold will be kind of working behind the scenes and perhaps responding to questions in the chat, or if you have any technical issues, please feel free to reach out. And Alan Klein is also joining us. And Alan, I'd just like to invite you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Klein, Wolf Brown's Director of Audience Research Programs. I am a white person with brown beard and long hair, a purple shirt and a black overshirt, and I use he, they pronouns, and I am glad to see you all. Thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you, Alan. So I thought I'd start by just giving a little bit of background about this study and kind of how we arrived at this point. So hopefully all of you are familiar with the Audience Outlook Monitor, which is an initiative of Wolf Brown to create a research community around better understanding our audiences and making audience research affordable for organizations of all size by kind of pooling our efforts and deploying audience surveys through cohorts of organizations, and then sharing that data, collecting it all and sharing it through online dashboards, which allow the organizations to see their own data in comparison to the responses from other participating organizations. So through that kind of research project or initiative that's ongoing and addresses several, we have surveys on various topics, from dodo motivations to audience preferences and so forth. I won't go over that here. But I did want to just kind of share the background that last year we decided that we wanted to launch a survey specifically looking at inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and audiences' perceptions and feelings about the work that we're doing in our organizations around those themes. As we got into that survey, we realized that accessibility is really such a huge topic in itself that there was no way that we could do it justice within the context of that study. So we decided, rather than kind of treat it in a cursory manner, we'd just set that aside and come back to it and do a kind of phase 2 of this idea study. That's what we're now doing with this work, is we're following up on that commitment to really explore in depth the issues around accessibility. So we launched this second phase of the study sometime last spring. Again, as we got into that, realized that we wanted to address this in several different ways. It's a huge topic, accessibility, and we can't cover all of that with any single survey. I mean, there's all sorts of issues, from inclusion and representation on stage, and whose work gets shown and how is that perceived in the media environment, and all of these different issues that are all important, but we had to kind of decide what we thought we could take on and accomplish with this. And so what we've settled on is 3 parts to this research. The first being a survey of accessibility practices at performing arts organizations, and that's what we'll be discussing today. The second piece is a survey of ticket buyers, asking about their experiences and needs in terms of accessibility. And the third will be actually qualitative. We thought it would be really important to actually do some qualitative focus groups with audience members and hear in more kind of context and depth about their experiences. So that's kind of how this piece of work, the organizational survey, fits in. It's in a way a kind of unusual research project in that disability inclusion is really an ongoing conversation. It's not going to be a question that we find the answer to, and then the solution is we need more ASL interpretation, and if everyone does that, then we've solved the problem. It's really a matter of kind of how we advance the conversation in our field around increasing accessibility, and how we advance the efforts of all of you who work in the field to increase accessibility at your organizations. And so that's really the spirit of today's conversation, is not that we have the final results on these questions, but more how we can take this data that we've collected and use that to inform and inspire our conversations in the field. We're going to be looking at the data that's, as I said, collected in this online dashboard today. Those of you who took the survey should have received an email with your access to the dashboard just earlier today. So you'll get a username, and then you'll create a password, and then you'll be able to log into the dashboard and either follow along today if you'd like, or after the session dig in and really go through in more detail. We're not going to be able to cover everything today because there's a lot of data in there. If you would like to get access for additional staff members on your teams, you're also welcome to reach out to us, and we can set up additional users for those organizations that have completed the survey. So we're going to be sharing, kind of going through, just letting you know what's available on the dashboard, how to use it, but also sharing out some of the key findings. The purpose, as I mentioned, is really about generating conversation and kind of collectively interpreting the data that we're receiving. And this is really data that's hot off the press, as Alan mentioned. We just closed the survey last week. And so we're still kind of trying to wrap our heads around it and make sense of it. Since it would be a little bit difficult to facilitate a conversation with all of these people that are joining us on the call today, I've invited a few people who responded to the survey, and 2 of our advisory committee members to join the conversation today and respond to what they're seeing in the data and kind of kick the conversation off in that way. So I'd like to start, before we go any further, by asking those respondents to introduce themselves. So maybe could we start with Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Tellez. I'm the Audience and Accessibility Services Coordinator at the Hobby Center for Performing Arts in Houston. I am a white female with graying brown hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a green shirt with some blue flowers on it today.
Thank you. And Aislinn.
Hi, my name is Ashleen Gagliardi. I am the Patron Services Assistant Manager and Accessibility Lead at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra here in Chicago. Busy week here with the DNC in town, but we fortunately don't have any concerts this week, so we are good. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white woman with brown hair pulled up, bangs. I'll occasionally be wearing some blue light glasses, and I'm wearing a black short sleeve top.
Thank you. Adam?
Hi, my name is Adam Perry. I am a bald white male wearing a green shirt. I am a person who identifies as blind. I use he, him pronouns, and I've worked in the performing arts field for over 25 years.
Thanks. And Sarah?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Hom. I'm the Director of Audience Services for Roundabout Theater Company, where I also lead our accessibility work and our EDI work. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a mid-40s Chinese woman with short black hair. I'm wearing black and yellow striped glasses and a yellow tank dress. And I do identify as disabled. I've been disabled since birth. I have cerebral palsy, and I'm a cane user.
Thank you so much for the introductions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the dashboard and kind of preview the different sections of the dashboard, and then I'll call upon the respondents to kind of share some reflections on what we've seen together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone seeing my dashboard, or is that my whole desktop?
I'm seeing your whole desktop, John.
This is okay. Sorry, let me retry that. I think I grabbed the wrong one there. Does this look better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So once you log on to the dashboard, those of you who already have access, this is what you will see, which is basically this list of what we call different reports on the dashboard. And basically, each of these is just a collection of the survey questions, kind of grouped by topic, to make it a little bit easier to navigate through these. So I always like to start these sessions by looking at who responded to our survey, so that we have a sense of what kind of where this data is coming from. And so just by clicking into this responding organizations, you'll get into the report. And if you scroll down, you'll find the charts. And so here we're just looking at budget size of the organizations from under $500,000 to over 20 million. And we see that there's a fairly good range of organizations with between 8% or 5% for the smallest category and up to 27% for the 2 million to 5 million category. But relatively good distribution across all of these budget categories. Then if we just scroll down, we've asked the organizations to identify whether they're producers or presenters primarily. And again, we have a pretty good mix. We have 48% that are identified as presenters and 41% who say they're producers, and 11% other. So then the next chart is showing the breakdown by discipline, and here we see some limitations. I should also note we're looking at a total of 63 responses to the survey, which is enough to give us, a diverse cross-section of organizations across the US and Canada. We're seeing here that it's quite a range of organizations, but at the same time, it's not a huge number of organizations. So that's something to keep in mind, that even a small number of organizations clicking one box rather than the other, that already makes quite a big difference in the percentage that we're seeing. And we see some of those limitations of the sample and perhaps also our outreach strategy here in the disciplines. So we have 38% of the organizations that say they're multidisciplinary organizations, 27% that are theaters, and 22% that are classical music organizations. But we only have 2% opera, 2% dance, and so there's some limitations to the breadth of the performing arts that we've covered here. That's why I think it's useful to be aware of kind of who's responding to the survey before we dive into the analysis. And then the final chart here, just to kind of set the stage for you, is whether or not the organizations own their venue. Or their primary venue is what we asked on the survey. And we have 57% who say yes, they own their venues, and 43% who say no. So it's also helpful, before we move on, just to see how these different kind of underlying variables interact with each other. So we get a sense of, are all of the largest organizations presenters and all of the smallest organization producing entities. So what we can do with the dashboard, sorry, I kind of did this quite quickly, is we can apply these filters that will split the data up by these various crosstabs. So I'm applying the filter by organizations, and then if you hit apply options and scroll back down to where the data is shown, we'll see that we have only the 3 largest categories displayed here in terms of discipline. So we have classical music on the left, and there we have a pretty good range of classical music organizations, though we do have 36% of those classical music organizations have budgets over $20 million. So those are some of the largest organizations that we have in here. In the middle column, we have the interdisciplinary organizations, and there's a more even distribution across the entire range, including some that are under 500,000 and all the way up to that 20 million category. And for the theaters, interestingly, we have a lot clustered in the middle range, which is $2 million to $5 million annual budget, and less of the smallest organizations and the largest. again, this is just a kind of, in a way, background finding, so we know what we're looking at when we're looking at this data. We shouldn't interpret this as, you know, being reflective of the performing arts in general, or that this is, you know, a characteristic of all theaters across the country or anything like that. Here I've filtered the budget size by presenters and producers. Again, there is a fairly good range across both of those categories, but we do see that the producers in our survey responses actually tend to have slightly larger budget sizes. So in the largest categories, they have stronger representation, with 19% over $20 million and 19% between $10 million and $20 million annual budgets. And the presenters are kind of a little bit more evenly distributed across the entire spectrum of the budget ranges. And then just finally, to have a look at the venues, and it's perhaps not surprising that the organizations that own their own primary venues also tend to have a larger budget size. So again, there is some variation there, including some that own their venues. 6% of the organizations that own their venues have budgets under 500,000. So that's our smallest budget category. But overall, they have slightly higher average budget size than the organizations that don't own their venue. So all of that is just kind of context to set the stage before we jump in. And I would like to start by looking at the mobility services. I'll just kind of go over the structure of this report for you, which is similar for a lot of the other reports, just to help you kind of get oriented to how the dashboard works and what we're looking at. So,
John, you're still looking at the respondent.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Alan. So what we have at the top here is a kind of overview of all of the questions that are on this report. And what this shows is, you can think of it as kind of how widespread the adoption of these different services and amenities are. So on the left side, you see that there's a score assigned from 1 to 3, with 1 representing organizations that just don't offer that service. 2 is assigned to organizations that aren't currently offering that service but are considering it for the future. And a 3 is for those organizations that are currently providing that service. And so this just gives us a kind of general overview of how these different services compare to each other in terms of how widespread their adoption is. And so what I'm going to do with these charts is just start at the top, so the ones that are most widely adopted, and then I'll kind of scroll through and read out the order of these, so you get a sense of kind of how common these are, and which ones are less widespread in their adoption. So at the top of the list, we have chairs and benches in waiting areas, lobbies, and in the hallways. Then we have accessible restrooms on one floor of the venue, accessible seating in one section of the house, accessible pathway from parking into the facility, patron drop-off and pickup areas, designated parking spaces. We're now kind of in the middle of the range of services. Continue on down, accessible restrooms on every floor. So previously we had heard about restrooms on a single floor, which is obviously more widespread. Accessible seating in all or most sections of the house. Wheelchair seating in all or most sections of the house. And then at the bottom, curb-to-seat assistance for patrons arriving who need assistance. So that's just the kind of overview chart to help you kind of orient yourselves. But if we continue to scroll down, there's a separate chart for each of these that shows how many of the responding organizations are currently providing that service. So in the case of designated parking spaces, that's 74% that are currently providing that, 3% that are not offering it but are considering it for the future, and 23% who just say that they're not offering that service at all and not considering adding that. So I'm not going to scroll through all of these, but just to give you a sense again, so we go through each of these questions. So we have the accessible pathways from the parking into the facility, with 84% providing that, accessible seating in one section of the house provided by 90% of the responding organizations. However, it's only 60% for the organizations that say they have accessible seating in all or most sections of the house. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to scroll down to highlight the last question on this report, which is a write-in question, basically asking people what else they are doing in terms of increasing accessibility for those who have mobility needs. And here, this is just displayed as a table where you can read through those write-in responses. You also have the option, you can tab through them. They're on kind of multiple pages here. You can also, if you want to, select select specific write-in responses and add a tag for them that you can type into this box at the bottom, and then click this select tagged responses, or sorry, tag selected responses. And then once you've done that, you can filter for those that have a tag. So I just tagged some of kind of new ideas that I'll just highlight here, so you get a sense of what you'll find in there. So you have one organization that's interested in adding push buttons to make entering and exiting the ADA bathrooms more easy. One that is making note of the fact that on high traffic days, they get long lines for the elevators. So it's not just always a matter of, is the service provided or not? It's also, do you have sufficient availability to actually provide this in a way that's sufficient and supportive of everyone? Then we have someone who is talking about currently providing armless chairs to those who request them, and would like to expand options for chairs that are comfortable for people with different specific requests. Maybe they have back pains or need to stand, or other mobility issues that require special seating. And then we have, courtesy wheelchairs. That's not something we had asked about, but I think a couple of the write-ins note that. This organization also provides courtesy golf cart transport from the garage to the front of the theater. So again, this is just kind of a place you can read through these and perhaps get inspired, get some new ideas about other things that other organizations are either doing or considering. So I will just quickly add a filter here just to see how some of this looks. Let's see, let's add since this is about mobility, a lot of the features are kind of tied to the venue. So let's apply the venue filter here. And if we look, there we go. And just so you know, to avoid the scrolling, you can also click on these jump links to jump down. So I'm going to just jump to the designated parking spaces. And you'll notice that if the response numbers are under 30, you have to click this box over here that says show unstable data. And basically what that's letting you know is that there's just a small number of responses that you're looking at. So in this case, it's only 27 responses from organizations that don't own their primary venues. And so that's just a little flag to kind of remind you that it's a low number of responses, and you should kind of be cautious about how much you want to make out of that if it's only, a small handful of organizations responding to that specific question. Some of the questions are follow-ups, so the response numbers are lower for those. But here what you see is that I thought it was interesting, actually, the organizations that don't own their own venues actually are more likely to say that they're currently providing designated parking spaces. 29% of the organizations that own their venues are not providing designated parking spaces. And then if we look at, and I'm going to just jump down to the curb to seat assistance, you see kind of the opposite, that it's the organizations that own their own venues that are more likely to provide curb to seat assistance. So 57% of the organizations that own their own venue provide curb to seat assistance, whereas 62% of the organizations that don't have their own venues are not offering that and not considering that service in the future. Thought that was kind of interesting, and it's interesting to speculate about why we might be seeing that. But I'd like to, I've been rambling on a little bit. I'd like to invite Ishleen into the conversation and see if you have any thoughts on either what I've been showing here or what else you've seen in the dashboard.
Yeah, the curb to seat assistance had jumped out at me as well. I think a lot of it may be organization specific more than venue. Well, it could be a combination because there's a lot of concerns with legality and liability. So, for example, at the CSO, we don't actually offer a staff member to take someone in a wheelchair, but we do provide an in-house wheelchair that the person can use with a caregiver or a family member, a friend, to get them from the entry of the building to their seating area. So, and I've heard varying things from different venues, how they're tackling that. The other thing that stood out to me is that a lot of venues offer wheelchair seating, definitely in only one area of the hall, but it seemed more limited, and same with bathrooms, but it seemed more limited with every single area of the hall to have both the accessible bathrooms and the accessible seating offered. I mean, I know there is some middle ground, you know, where it could be on some of the floors and not others. We own our building, we're in a historical building, so there are some limitations, but some of the bathrooms can only be accessed by taking stairs, and they're not on a floor where there's an elevator available to, like, that can get to that level. And I wonder too if there's other venues in similar positions where they're making use of an older building that has some architectural constraints. But, you know, I'm glad, I was heartened to see that overall, at minimum, you know, there is accessible seating somewhere in the building, there is accessible bathrooms somewhere in the building, versus none at all. It's a good starting point, but it would be nice to see it expand further too, as much as is able.
Yeah, thank you. And here, just to highlight your point, so this still has the filter on between venues that own their own, organizations that own their own venue and those that don't. But basically, it's 96 versus 94% that say they have some wheelchair seating, at least in one section of the house. So quite widespread. But having wheelchair seating in most sections, it's 42% for those that don't own their venues and 60% for those that do. So yeah, much less. Are there any other responses from the other respondents? Any thoughts on what was just shared? I think that I can certainly say that just from the write-in responses, you're certainly not alone, that the kind of being in historic buildings obviously provides a lot of challenges for a lot of people. But there are also, it's interesting to think about the kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of services that can be provided and training that can be provided versus the kind of the more investment intensive and challenging roadblocks to overcome, such as old buildings and requirements that come with that. Okay, so then let's move on to the next section. And I'll go into the vision services here. And so here we have a report that's laid out similarly to the previous one we looked at. So again, we have this kind of overview chart at the very top. And I'll just briefly go through. Oh, wait, are we still? Okay, now we're on the vision services. So I'll briefly scroll through this just to give a broad sense, again, of the adoption of these services. So the most widely available is accommodations for service animals. And then quite a bit below that is large print programs, followed by large print interior signage for easier wayfinding. Then comes curb-to-seat assistance, touch tours to gain familiarity with components of the production, audio programs, and by programs there we're referring to like playbills. And the last one on the list here is pre-recorded audio descriptions. Those are least common. And then we again have the individual charts for each of these questions, which I'm not going to go through now. But I did want to just highlight, as mentioned, large print programs. That was one of the higher ranking services that's provided. And we have 52% of the organizations that currently provide large print programs, and 28% that say they're not currently doing that, but are considering it for the future. But on this chart, we also have follow-up questions asking about the frequency with which these services are provided. So if we continue scrolling down, you'll see that of those organizations that are providing large print programs, 38% are only doing that upon request. So that's a third of those organizations that are only providing large print programs on request, whereas 59% provide large print programs for all or most performances. So if we think back, there was 52% that provide large print programs. You can't really count on all of those organizations to actually have a large print program for you. If you just show up at the door, you'd have to request it in advance in order to get access to that. At the bottom of this report, again, there's the write-in. I have just a couple tags that I put on there of other things that people are doing in terms of vision services. One organization is creating a tactile map of the venue. One is offering raised QR codes for scannable audio content, which I thought was interesting. I've heard about that for business cards that have a kind of like a little braille bumps on it that you can realize that there's a QR code on there, and then by scanning that you can get additional content for those who are blind or vision impaired. Here we have another organization that's offering a pre-show email that offers a screen reader accessible PDF of the program so that people can access that ahead of time. So again, I'll just, to have a little bit of a deeper look, add a filter here. Let's have a look at the discipline filter. And, there's some things that I think are quite intuitive here. If we look at, say, touch tours, we'll see that those are much more common at the theaters than they are in classical music venues. None of the responding classical music organizations currently provides touch tours. Again, we don't want to overgeneralize. I'm sure that there are classical music organizations that are doing various things along those lines. But of our survey respondents, we didn't have any. And it's 38% of the theaters that currently provide touch tours and 17% of the multidisciplinary organizations. And if we have a look at audio programs, you'll see that it's a little bit more balanced. It's actually the classical music organizations that are most likely to currently provide audio programs. 21% of the classical music organizations provide that. However, it's also noteworthy to me that 64% of the classical music organizations say they're not offering that, and they're not even considering audio programs for the future. Whereas among the theaters, there's not many that are currently offering it, but there's a lot more that are interested in adding that service in the future. All right, so Debbie, did you have any questions or comments or observations you wanted to share here?
Well, clearly it appeared to me that, we focus on what are the easiest things, and service dogs or things that have been around a while and been mandated in many venues, large print playbills and things like that. I think there's two factors that often come into play with these things, and one of them is cost, and there were some comments in there about the cost. And part of that, I wonder how many people are not using things either because of the cost factor or because of the timing factor. For instance, we offer Braille programs for all our big musical theater productions. This is at no cost to us. We became familiar with an organization that does it for us at no cost, whether it's one program or 20 programs. But again, we have to have the time for them to do it. They have to have it at 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So if it is something like a touring show, we can get it. If it's a local production that they're going to change all the way up to the last minute, probably not. So I certainly want to dig down a little bit more into this to see, by organization, and perhaps try to see if we can figure out the timing or the frequency. Same thing with like live audio description. It's, 41% said they currently provide it, but when I started looking down at, the breakout, of course, we got into those numbers that were less than 30, and it was hard to really identify how frequently are they doing this. We only do it usually one performance per week run or 2-week run, because it takes prep time. You've got to see that performance at the beginning and then prep it to do by the end of the week. So I guess I would be interested to know whether there's some people that are actually doing it for every single performance, sort of the frequency of their offering. Just so we, our goal is to eventually get to the point that all our audiences can come at any time to have these services. And I think right now we're dealing with some cost issues and some timing in terms of prepping of these services.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. Those are great points. Anything else to add on that report or in response to Debbie? And I haven't mentioned this before, I haven't been monitoring the chat, but I know my colleagues are. And if you have any questions or thoughts that you just want to share in the chat, all are welcome to type in there. Some questions my colleagues might just respond to in the chat, and others they might kind of elevate and bring into the conversation if that seems more appropriate. So yeah, please feel free to join the conversation in that way. All right, so I'm going to move into the next section, and we were a little bit slow getting started here, just kind of getting our bearings. So we'll move through these a little bit more quickly as we hit our stride with this. So we're now moving into the hearing services. Again, the structure of this report is quite similar across all of these kind of audience services reports. So I'll just go through the options that are explored here, again, on this overview chart that shows the level of adoption. So the most commonly provided service is assistive listening devices available for checkout. That's followed by sign language, ASL interpretation. Then there's the ability to connect hearing aids to sound amplification systems via induction loop or T-coil technology, open captioning, closed captioning is less common, and then finally the ability to connect hearing aids to a sound amplification system via Bluetooth. So there's some interesting relationships in the adoption of some of these technologies that I think might be worth exploring more. And, you know, I realize we're just scratching the surface on all of these. We're actually planning kind of what, after we've conducted the ticket buyer survey, we're going to kind of take the organization, what the organization's saying about their services and what the audiences are saying about services, and then kind of facilitate individual conversation on each of these kind of service areas so that we can get into a bit more of the details of what, you know, what it takes to provide these different services and some of these challenges and how people are overcoming them. But in terms of the adoption of these technologies, so open captioning is more frequent than closed captioning, as I mentioned. So 37% of the responding organizations are currently providing open captioning, and 27% are not currently providing it, but considering open captions for the future. And if we scroll down, we see that closed captioning is currently provided by 20% of the organizations, but it's 38, so a larger percentage of organizations that are interested in providing closed captioning. So in a way, it's less prevalent in its current state, but there seems to be a lot of interest in the idea that you could provide closed captioning potentially on people's personal devices, on their cell phone or their own tablets, so that you could make captioning available that way without having them visible to all audience members in the hall. And there's a similar thing going on with assistive listening devices. So those are the most commonly adopted technologies for hearing services. So 84% of the responding organizations currently provide assistive listening devices, and only 5% are interested in adding that. However, if we look at sound connecting hearing aids to induction loop or T-coil systems, that's 44% only, so only about half as many organizations that are currently providing that. But again, there's more interest in adding that service. And that's even more the case with the ability to connect hearing aids to amplification systems via Bluetooth. So only 16% are currently providing that, but 35% are interested in adding that service. So that suggests to me that there's a lot of interest and kind of movement in those areas, that people are getting on board with those newer technologies that would allow, presumably if it's Bluetooth, not only people who have hearing aids, but also anyone who has a cell phone in their pocket that could connect to the Bluetooth signal could have access to amplified sound if they wanted that to hear the dialogue better, or, you know, to hear the music better, whatever the case might be. All right, I'm going to, I think, Debbie, I'd assign this one to you again ahead of time. So do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share?
Well, again, it comes down to the frequency of some of the services. I noticed on the sign language the ASL interpreters, that 67% were saying that they offered it, but when you dove down into the frequency, only 7% indicated all or most performances. 46% were saying infrequently. We were certainly in that infrequent category simply because that was defined as at least once a run or a tour. And I think that's a cost issue. Largely, it's I can get an audio description provider in here a lot faster, a lot less expense than I can an interpreter. So, you know, the services are going to vary by availability of resources and cost. The other thing, as you mentioned, the other thing that struck me was the interest in the technology. Having just come back from, you know, the LEAD conference earlier this month, we heard a lot about this Bluetooth technology and the T-Coil. And one of the big discoveries was the lag time with the hearing aid manufacturers outfitting those hearing aids to connect with this technology. So we too went to the conference hopeful we were going to find that Bluetooth solution or some improvement upon our listening devices. And I think that the timeline for that was a bit concerning, you know, when we start looking at 5 and 10 years down the line before hearing aid manufacturers catch up and it all gets available easily across the board.
Yeah, those are great points. And thank you for pointing out that the frequency issue with the ASL that also stood out to me. I'm showing that here on the screen. So while it was quite frequently adopted that a lot of organizations said that they were providing ASL, 46% are only providing that upon request. Another 46 are saying they're doing that infrequently. So just, you know, presumably one or two or a small number of productions in each one or performances in each one, and only 7% are doing that kind of consistently throughout. All right, thanks. So let's move on to sensory processing services. And so this is the last of these kind of audience facing services that we have on the dashboard. So again, I'll just kind of give the overview of what's in here. So the most frequently available service is Quiet Space for those who need a break from the performance. Then there is sensory guides or show guides. So kind of letting people know what to expect during the performance. Sensory kits are available at organizations. Then there's sensory friendly or relaxed performances. So as a kind of performance format. And then the lowest on this, and there are only 5 questions on this report, the social narratives or visual schedules, which is more focused on kind of what the steps and experiences is going to be when you arrive at the venue and kind of what the environment is going to be, what's going to happen as a step-by-step kind of preview so people know what to expect during their visit to your organization. So here, one of the things that's interesting to me is that there were so many organizations that provide quiet space. I guess I was, so it's 63% of the organization say that they provide quiet spaces, and 24% say that they're not offering that but are considering it, and only 13% that are not offering it at all. So this is another one where I thought it was interesting to look at the frequency. I was wondering, well, is that a service that is provided, you know, just when they offer a you know, relaxed performance or sensory friendly performance? And so diving down in here, the quiet spaces actually, to my surprise, 63% of those that provide them say that they provide them at all or most performances. And that made me kind of question a little bit about kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about quiet spaces, if they just mean that there's, a lobby where you can hang out if you want to, or, you can, go find a quiet space, or are those really made accessible to people so that it's, even just like socially acceptable that you're going to get up and take the time that you need outside and come back into the performance at a later time, or that you can continue to be engaged with the performance even while you're in the quiet space. So those was just some of the questions that came up for me. But I'd be curious to hear what others thought about these charts on this report.
I had the same thought, John, because when we have done a sensory-friendly production, taken one of the big shows like Lion King or Aladdin, we have gone all out and we've provided all these things you question about. The social narratives, the quiet area, all those things, but it only happens at those performances. And the quiet area, I'm with you, I was shocked. I mean, I started researching some of the venues here in town, which are primarily sports venues or concert venues that say they offer the quiet space. And on one website, they described it as a room with 2 bean bags, 1 to 2 people comfortably. And when I questioned someone who worked over there, they said, oh yeah, that used to be a storage closet. Well, maybe it does get you away from the sound and the sensation hitting you, but if you're providing a live performance, you've lost connection. And we and when we do a sensory friendly, we have a monitor in that space, very low level of sound, but it allows them not to lose connection with something they can't retrieve just by stepping back in.
Yeah. Are there any other thoughts or comments on these services? All right, then we're going to move into the next section, which is a little bit different here. And we'll get into communications, because now we've talked so far about what services are provided or not, and now we're going to look at how people are finding out what's even available. So I'm just going to kind of preview what's here on this, because as I said, the structure is a little bit different. So the first question is just whether you have a web page on your website that describes the accessibility services that your organization offers. And that's 84% say that they have a website like that. Then we have a question about which of the following services or which of the following they do in order to ensure that their website is accessible. And so here, the first couple categories are the don't know, none of the above, and other, with kind of small response numbers under 15%. And then we get into the larger categories, and they're providing high color contrast on websites is the most common, with 56%. 46% say they perform periodic tests or audits of their website's accessibility. 48% embed alt text for their images. And 44% say that they're screen reader accessible. So those are the kind of larger categories. And then some of the smaller ones at 25% are captioning included for all videos, which I actually find kind of surprising that it's that low. And 21% who provide image descriptions for all images. Then again, I'm just going to kind of go through what's on this report. So there's a question about where services are announced. And here, I won't go through all of these categories one by one, because there's a lot, but kind of what stands out is that 75% say that they publicize their services on an accessibility page on their website. And then across all of these other categories, it's kind of between like 25-30% and 40% for just about all of these other categories. which include things like printed flyers, posters, season brochures, pre-event info emails, ticket confirmation emails, promotional emails, e-newsletters, ticketing software that alerts you to the accessibility services, social media posts, event listings and advertisements, and event announcements on the website. So those are the categories. And as I said, there's kind of roughly even number of organizations selecting each of those. But if you filter this by various filters, it's not like there's some organizations that are doing all of this and others that are not doing any of it. So each of the organizations, it seems, based on the admittedly somewhat limited data we have, is providing some of these. And so for me, the takeaway is that it's really difficult for people to know where they're going to learn about what services are provided, because different organizations are publicizing it. Some are doing it on social media and in their postcards, and others are doing it on their website and in their ticket confirmation emails. So if there were greater consistency across the field, that always in the ticket confirmation email, you're going to get that information, or you're always going to get it on the event announcements, I think that would make it a lot easier for people to find the information that they're looking for, rather than having to figure out how each organization is announcing the services that they provide. So I'll just continue scrolling through here. So this is about email communications and how organizations are making those available. It's kind of similar to the website accessibility features. And then finally on this chart, there are a couple of write-in responses that I won't get into now. But the final chart on this is the ways in which audience members can request services. So here the largest categories are emailing customer service representatives and calling customer service phone lines. So both of those are around 90%. That's followed by approaching a staff member or usher at the performance. But if you look at, say, the options to indicate your needs while buying tickets, either through submitting a comment during the ticketing process or by requesting specific accommodations during the ticketing process. So like checking boxes of what's available and just being able to say, yes, I would like these services. Those are far lower at 38% and 46% of the responses. So that's a kind of overview of what's here on the communications page. Aislinn, would you like to share any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same general things jumped out to me as what you're highlighting here. If you go back if you don't mind going back to the part about announcing the accessible services,
Mm-hmm.
I think what really stood out to me here is that it seems, irrespective of the budget size or owning the venue or not, or just any of the filters across the board, people seem to be relying very heavily on the accessibility page on their website being sort of the one-stop shop for getting the information across. I think the trouble with that is that even the best laid plans can go awry, even the best laid out websites, not everyone is going to find that accessibility page on their own. And so I did like that. I saw that when you filter by discipline, that the theater world seemed to be a little bit ahead in the game as far as making the outreach effort of putting information out on social media and just doing more like active outreach. The other thing is if you're not getting that information until you get your confirmation email or concert reminder, I mean, that's really stuff you need to know before you buy your ticket. You know, it doesn't serve anyone well to have it as an afterthought. So, I mean, I think just across the board, it would be great to see organizations of any size, of any kind of performance, to make a more concerted outreach effort in various ways. It seems very low priority on the print materials as well. And kind of hand in hand with that is then when you scroll down to the part about ticketing, putting your requests in during the ticketing process, or how do you go about requesting these accommodations, the onus is really on the patron to reach out to the organization and make those requests. That could be largely because they can't find the accessibility page on your website, or the information is not obvious or easily available or easy to find, whether or not you have a disability. I mean, it's irrespective of that. And then it's also, I'm hoping to see that through the online ticket process, I'm hoping to see that those numbers will increase as ticketing software develops to become more accessible for the online ticketing purchase path. We use Tessitura ticketing software. They are, so in some ways we're limited by what their limitations are, but we've been able to, for example, update our seat maps for the select your own seat option, where we're relying on symbols and numbering more than color coding to bypass any color blindness, things like that, but also so that it's more prominent as far as highlighting seats that can accommodate various access requirements. Again, it's something that the patron would have to come across themselves, so you wouldn't want to rely on that as the only way for the patron to figure it out. But I'm hopeful that as technology continues to improve, that we might see those numbers go up over time. But again, I think the more that the organization can make the first effort to really promote all the amenities they have available, including those that are accessibility related, I think that could also affect how accessible the numbers change for how the accessibility services are made available and how people are going about asking for those services, because people want to be able to plan ahead. They don't want to have a last minute accommodation request in person.
Yeah, and to your point about the accessibility page on the website being kind of what most organizations, 75%, are announcing their accessibility services there. I thought another thing that was quite interesting here is to filter this by budget size and look at the website accessibility and looking at which organizations' websites are screen reader accessible. So it's actually the largest organizations on the right column here with budgets over 10 million. Only 30% of those organizations say their websites are screen reader accessible. So if that's what you're relying on to announce your accessibility services, that seems a little bit challenging. And I thought it was interesting, that it's 50 and 52% of the smaller organizations, the mid-sized and small organizations that say their websites are screen reader accessibility. And I think I discussed this with the advisory committee a couple of days ago, and some of the larger organizations that have the money to develop flashier websites actually are creating websites that are less accessible for some users. And so that's just interesting to see here in the data. Okay, I think we need to move along, and I'd like to move over now to the staff training report. And I'll take off the filters. So yeah, there are just a couple of questions on this report. The first being, to what extent staff members at the organizations have received training on increasing access and engaging people with disabilities. So there we have, where is it? here 13% that haven't provided any training to their staff. We have 33% that say that individual staff members have received training if it's particularly relevant to their day-to-day work. Then we have 17% who have trained all staff within a specific department, and 16% that have included accessibility within kind of more general staff training. And only 13% say that all of their staff have received training specifically on disability access and inclusion. So where training is provided, it tends to be kind of more on a one-by-one basis and then focused, or in departments. And there's a follow-up question here about which departments are most likely to get trained for those who provide it to specific departments. And not surprisingly, 90% of those respondents say that they're training their patron services, including box office and ushers. Then it's 30% that are training their marketing and communications teams. 40% are training their education teams, but only 10% are training development teams to engage with audiences that have disabilities. And then the others categories are the other and don't know. So scrolling down further, then the last question on this report is about ushers and how frequently trained ushers are available at performances. And here we see that 56% say that trained ushers are always available at performances, and 27% say that they sometimes are. This is one that I thought was useful to filter by the organization type, so between the presenters and the producers. And there we see that the presenters are much more likely to be providing trained ushers consistently at 77% versus just 31% of the producing organizations. Whereas 38% of the producing organizations say that they just sometimes have trained ushers available. So Sarah, would you like to jump in on this one and share any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of data points that were of particular interest to me as we were looking at this. Especially in comparison to another data point, which we haven't looked at yet, but it was talking about practices throughout the organization of disability and accessibility policies. And there was a rather high percentage of organizations that reported that they have policies in place across all departments, across the entire organization. And as I think we look at this, I think there are a lot of challenges when we think about meaningfully incorporating folks with disabilities across an organization at all of our various touch points, whether that is staff, on our stages, or as we usually think about them as audience members, if we are not very specifically and deliberately training everyone to be prepared to have to engage in that inclusion. And so accessibility being relevant to our day-to-day, it's actually relevant to everybody's day-to-day as we think about this. We haven't even touched on IT departments or finance departments. Finance departments, because we need them to pay for our things. And this often costs money. And also our IT departments, as we rely more and more on technology, we really are needing them to be up to date and to understand the importance of meaningful disability inclusion. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is that I think a lot of the times I'd be very interested to dig in more in the future about what types of trainings we're providing. On the advisory committee, we've been talking a lot about it's not just the what that's being offered, but also the why and the how. And you can provide all the access points that you want, but if someone with a disability walks through the doors and comes through the doors and they're still made to feel like you're not prepared for them, or whatever you are providing is a problem, or it's a lot about the feeling and the inclusion aspect of it. And I also think that if we are looking at training from a strictly, this is what we offer, this is what we do, and this is how you do it, so much of accessibility is creative problem solving. So much of living with a disability is creative problem solving. And it's not about going through a checklist and going through a script. And so unless we're training people on just how to have good interactions, I think we will continue to run into some snags in how welcoming we are being. And I think this is my final point. I think that we also, I think back to having accessible seats in all areas of our venues. And some who even own the venues aren't thinking about it. Now, I get that some of that might be because of budget, or it might be because of a historic venue. There could be any number of reasons. I also know firsthand from my experiences that unless we are making the case for meaningful inclusion across our organizations at all responsibility levels, at all departments, it's hard to be able to build a case when an opportunity comes up. Let's say you get a big grant, or you have an angel funder or whatever it may be, and they're going to fund a big renovation of the building. And I get that all of us aren't in all the conversations. So if we haven't built that case support, the organizational support for access, then that might be a lost opportunity, because by the time the money comes in, that train's already left the station. Whereas we just as a quick example, we actually not too long ago did replaced all the seats in one of our venues, and unprompted by me, the person who was leading that project came to me and said, "Oh, I was thinking about it, and here are some other spaces where we could actually add some accessible seats and not just in the back of the house." And he said, "I was thinking about what you said," and so it was something I'd said years ago that then paid dividends down the road, and I didn't even have to really argue the case. And I think that's enormously helpful.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That's great to see it when kind of that really does some of the policies that are discussed actually are kind of taking effect and influencing people's thinking. We have just a couple more minutes here, so I want to just move on very briefly. I'm going to kind of give you not even get into detail here with this report on staff and artists. So I still have a filter applied. Let me take that off. This is the number of organizations that have provided accommodations for staff members with disabilities. 53% say that they have. Also noteworthy that 28% don't know. But the one that I wanted to focus on here, just in the interest of time, is the accommodations for artists backstage. Sorry, let me find the, there we go. 79% say that they've made accommodations for artists backstage, and we have, why am I not seeing? Oh, here we go. This is what types of services they provide backstage, but it's only 77% that provide even accessible bathrooms backstage, 65% that provide accessible pathways to backstage areas and the front of house, and 75% that provide accessible dressing rooms. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to move on here a little bit and talk about these kind of summary questions about accessibility practices. And so this is people's kind of general assessment of their practices and policies. This question, this first one, is about their policies, where actually 51% say that their accessibility policies are actively implemented across all departments, which I think that was one of the questions you were referring to, Sarah, earlier, about kind of what it means to adopt policies. 17% say that they have accessibility policies but don't consistently live up to the standards described therein. And 6% say they have accessibility policies, but they're not very useful and aren't used in their day-to-day decision-making. And 14% finally don't have any formal policies regarding accessibility. This is another one I want to focus on here just quickly, and that is how the perspectives of people with disabilities are represented within their organizations. So we have 57% that say that they have full-time staff members with disabilities, 49% say they have part-time staff members with disabilities, and 46% say that they have artist or ensemble members with disabilities. However, if we're looking at board members, it's only 21%, or advisory committees on accessibility is even lower with 14%. And this is an interesting one. I'll just, before we move on, filter this one by discipline. And look at the assessment of their overall services. So this is kind of overall, which of the following best describes the organization's accessibility services. So here we see considerable differences across the disciplines, with 24% of the theaters saying that they have accessibility integrated into their organizational culture and they think about it every day. That's 29% even for the multidisciplinary organizations, but just 7% of the classical music organizations. In fact, 50% of the classical music organizations say they have limited accessibility services and would like to offer more. So kind of acknowledging that there's significant work to be done there. Of course, this is the self-assessment of the organizations, and we'll be hearing from the audience members what their experiences are at these organizations, and it'll be interesting to see how that matches up. We're just about time here, so unfortunately, I think we'll have
John?
to wrap up.
Sorry,
Alan?
John. Yeah, hi. I just want a very important last minute announcement. Betty Siegel, could you come on camera if you're still with us? I think you are. I'm pleased to say that with the good graces of Betty and her team at the Kennedy Center's Office of Accessibility and VSA, we're pleased to be partnering on this research with Betty's office. And we're so very much looking forward to their input on the ticket buyer survey and their great assistance with interpretation of the research as it moves out from here. So thank you, Betty, so much for that. I also just want to note that we're keeping this survey open so that other organizations who've not taken the survey can take it and then gain access to the results. We only had 63. I'm hoping we can have more. We'd hope to get 100, but I'm hoping by the time we're done with this, especially Betty, if we're able to maybe get the word out a little more broadly, that we can really get this. And as more people respond, those responses will go right into the dashboard automatically, and you'll see the sample size increase. But finally, just to say we'll be transitioning now into the ticket buyer phase of this. I recorded an informational session about that, which is available on the Audience Outlook Monitor webpage. And I just wanted to thank you all. John, would you like to wrap up?
No, we're just finishing right on time here. So I think, yeah, there's additional information. I hope that someone can drop that link into this survey, into the chat with additional information about that survey. And thank you all for tuning in. And I hope you found it.
And our experts, much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your contributions to this. All right. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.